The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to our SIGUCCS webinar. My name is Lori Fox and I am the chair of the Executive Committee of SIGUCCS. Just a little bit of housekeeping first. I have everyone muted. Oops. And if you have a question, you can send me a question in the question box, or you can raise your hand if you have a question and I can unmute you. I see Eric said hello to me. If everyone could just raise their hands so I know you can hear me. There we go. I see the hands now. I just want to remind you that our SIGUCCS annual conference is coming up in just 2 months. Very excited to be going to New Orleans, and I hope that all of you are registered and ready to go. Our September book, which will be starting next week, although really you could start at any time, is Turn the Ship Around, a true story of turning followers into leaders. Mo Nishiyama and myself will be your discussion hosts. We usually do our discussion in Slack, and we'll start on Monday, September 23rd, which is the beginning of the last full week of the month. We've been reading a book a month, although I have to be honest, August was a little bit of a struggle. I did not finish the book, and I know I'm not the only one. But we also have already picked our October book, which is Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. Really looking forward to that book, and we're hoping to do some in-person book discussion work in New Orleans. I want to remind you to join SIGUCCS. The membership benefits include a discount on the conference, which more than pays for your membership, reduced cost pre-conference seminars. You also have access to all of the papers submitted by SIGUCCS in the ACM Digital Library, and the SIGUCCS mentoring program. We'll be kicking off a new mentoring program at the conference. Also, there's plenty of ways to connect with us. And if you go to that website, siguccs.org/WP/connect, you can find out how to join our email listserv, our Facebook community, or you can follow us on Twitter. We also use Slack. And I would say we have a pretty good conversation going on Slack most days. The popular channels that we have are book club that picks up towards the end of the month. We also have a conference channel where you can ask any questions about the conference. We have a productivity channel where we talk about time management and workload management and those types of things. And Mo Nishiyama posts a weekly challenge question most Wednesdays, and that's a fun channel to be in too. We have with us today Beth Lynn Nolen. Beth is a poster expert. She's one of my favorite designers. She's very talented. Beth, I'm going to change the presenter feature over to you. You should have it now. There you are. And I see your screen. So, Beth, I'm going to mute myself, but I will keep an eye on questions and pop in if I think we need to interrupt you.
Alrighty, that sounds good to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and then jump into today's presentation. So in today's presentation, I'm going to walk everybody through how to create an effective poster. And this is aimed towards making posters for the conference in November. And so if you've never made a research poster before, you might think, well, how do I get started? I'm a little intimidated by this whole process. What do I do? Well, creating research posters creating posters for presentation or research posters, they might sound intimidating, but it can actually be a lot of fun, especially if you've got a little bit more of an idea of what you're doing. And then also if you know your audience and your message, and I'll point that out a little bit later on, why they have an important role to play in designing your poster. So when you're making a poster, when you're getting started, you might think, well, what do I need? Do I need a lot of different things to make my poster? What do I have to have? First off, you need your text. And for most of us, for those of you who have submitted a poster presentation and written a paper to go with that, you've already got a starting point for your text. You don't necessarily want to put your whole paper into the poster, but that's a place where you can start and then build your poster text from that. For those of you who've won communication awards and are presenting as part of the communication awards, the text doesn't have to be incredibly long. Just focus on talking about what your award-winning object was, or program or course was, how you put it together, maybe any roadblocks that you encountered, and how people liked it. But putting together the text is not a scary process. It's pretty simple to do once you know exactly what you want to include. You also want to make sure you've got your images. You've got images that might either be, for example, for one of my research posters, I'm going to include screenshots from a workshop that won a communication award. For other posters, if you're talking about an event that you might have done on your campus or have done some research and have graphs you want to present, well, there's your images. So those should be pretty quick, pretty easy to collect. And then finally, I think this is actually the most important thing, because you can't do anything without your text and your images if you don't have some sort of page layout program. I'll talk a little bit more about those towards the end of today's session. But once you've got text, images, and a page layout program, then you're in a good spot to go start creating a poster. So to get started, first, one of my big suggestions, and this is something that not a lot of people think about when designing a research poster, because they're focusing on that content, on the research you want to present, on the information you're sharing. You want to think first, though, about some basic page layout and design principles. These can help you lay out your content in a way that's going to be appealing and attention-getting and get people interested in reading your poster. Once you've familiarized yourself with those basic design principles, you can collect your text and images, have those on hand and ready for part 3, which is sketching out a rough design of your poster. And this can even be just literally a sketch. I've got a couple of random scribbles in notebooks about a couple of different poster ideas that I've had for different posters that I've made. But once you've got your images and your text, once you've got a sketch that you can use to guide you, once you've got an idea of the design principles that can help make a good poster, then you build your poster. So before getting started though, before you jump into the whole process, it's important to know your audience as your message. I mentioned that at the beginning of the presentation. So your audience is going to be who's reading your poster, so your fellow conference goers. And your message is going to be what you want to share, the information that you're sharing, whether it's information about a communication awards winning project or some important work that you've done in the past year that you wrote a paper about and want to share. That's going to be your message. And so knowing your audience and your message is going to help you out as you design. They're going to influence all parts of your design process. So for example, if you've attended any of the recent SIGUCCS conferences and have seen some of my posters, you'll notice I tend to go with a little bit more fun of a theme. Like last year I did a Star Trek themed poster, and the year before, when I had a communication award winner that was literally about creating research posters, I made a Spaceballs themed poster, like creating research posters, the poster. And that's because I knew that the folks at SIGUCCS would enjoy these themes, and it would be a conversation starter, and then it ends up getting people interested in the actual content of my poster. So that's something to keep in mind, knowing your audience and then what you want to tell your audience before you start designing your poster. Now I'm going to start talking about some of these design principles. This is step 1 of the process. And the design principles, while there are 8 of them that I've taught in one of UIT's IT Training's page design and layout basics workshops, I've grouped them up together into 4 areas to make it a little bit easier to absorb, and then also to help them relate them to constructing a research poster. So these page layout principles are grouped into the area of focus, organization, restraint, and detail. And the first one we're going to focus on is focus. Focus involves getting your readers' attention on your poster, so getting them to look at your poster, getting them to focus on it, and then keeping their attention, excuse me, involves getting their attention and keeping it on your poster, so that way they're reading through your content. Excuse me one moment, I need to cough. My throat. I'm sorry about that. My building is incredibly dry today and it's messing with my speaking voice. So anyhow, focus. We want our readers to take a look at our poster, read through the whole poster. We want to get their attention. So the area of focus involves the page layout principles of contrast and proportion. Contrast just means making important items on your poster stand out in some way, shape, or form, either putting them in a different color, maybe using a different font if it's text, maybe adding a colored border to some images, using size, making things bigger to get attention, and that actually leads into the principle of proportion, making your most important items the largest items on your page. So the biggest items are going to be what initially attracts a reader's attention, whether it's the title of your poster or a large image, or maybe you've got your research question in large text towards the top of your poster. Those are going to be what's grabbing your reader's attention. So I've got an example of a poster that I've created, and I'm going to point out some parts that work on that tie into focus. First off, if you take a look at the headings, so let me just pull out my little pen here. If you take a look at some of the headings here, you'll notice that each of these headings are in a larger text. In fact, it's a different text than the body text, because the body text is a different font. So that helps give them some contrast. It's got color, and they're also larger than the surrounding text to help make it help indicate, okay, we're about to change topics here. I'm going to split up the text a little bit more and make just those pieces stand out more. And also, for contrast, I've got some color behind some of these quotes here to help them pop, to help them catch people's attention as well. And then with proportion, if you take a look, obviously the title is the largest item on the page, so the title is going to catch people's attention. And then underneath that, I have the research question that we were trying to answer here, down here at the bottom. And that, with that being the next largest thing, that's going to tell people what the poster is going to be about before they even get close to it. And that way, if it's something they're interested in, then they know to come in and take a look. So I'm going to clear all the ink here and move on. Next, I'm going to talk about organization. So organization means, oh, hold on here. I'm going to turn off my pen and turn on my slides here. So organization just means laying out your content in a way that's going to make sense to the reader as they read through your poster. So that involves the principles of direction and proximity. So with direction, that refers to leading readers through your page by intentional placement of design elements, especially eye-catching design elements, such as headings, such as colored areas and images and things like that. And when as you intentionally place those items, you're aiming to lead your reader through the page with some visual stepping stones. And then proximity just means grouping related items together, so that way things make sense. That way you've got a coherent story you're telling with your text and your images. If you have images that relate to one part of your text, but they're in a totally different part of your poster, that might confuse people as they're reading your content. So I've got another example here of a poster and how organization was used, and specifically direction and proximity. So the arrangement of the pictures here, so I've got one right here at the very start. The arrangement of these pictures is intentionally leading the reader through the poster. I've got kind of a zigzag going here that's going to pull the reader's eyes in from the top, draw them into that first column, get them reading, and then their eyes are going to look for the other eye-catching items on the page, and then it's going to draw them through the poster. You'll also notice that if you take a closer look at the results section here in the middle, I've got the graphs strategically placed with results because they discuss the results of the study here, and it just makes sense to have those graphs there with the information that it's discussing. So if I had other pictures that related specifically to the text, I would make sure that they're with their related items. With this poster, though, it's all just pictures of cats playing video games, so it all relates to all of the text. There's nothing specific going on here. So that's an example of organization at work in a poster. Next, I want to talk about restraint. Restraint means trying not to overwhelm your viewers with too much information. There can be a lot of things you want to include on a research poster. You might be tempted to just copy and paste your entire paper text and put it into your poster, or include lots of flashy images or lots of graphs depicting information that you've gathered, all sorts of information that some of it might just be very granular, very detailed, maybe not necessarily relevant to what other people might want to know. But there can be so much you might want to include on a poster. But you don't want to overwhelm your viewers with too much information on your poster. Think of it, so for one example that I like to use is, I'm sure you've all been to a presentation at some point where the presenter has a PowerPoint where everything is a wall of text and they're reading verbatim off the wall of text, or they've just got so much stuff on their PowerPoint slides that it's a little distracting and you're focusing more on what's going on that slide than the person presenting. Well, if you've got too much going on your research poster, people will either be a little overwhelmed by that content, or they might be focused more into trying to read that content and less involved in engaging with you. The poster is there to help support you and as you essentially present to people individually as they come up to your poster session. So make sure you don't have too much going on your poster. It might end up having an unintended results there. So exercising restraint in a poster specifically means limiting your poster's text to 800 words or fewer. That might not sound like a lot. That might sound like a pretty small amount of text. But if you're careful when you're crafting your text, if you're aware of those limits ahead of time, you can put your text together in such a way that you don't need to cut out too much once you're trying to put it into your poster. You also want to exercise restraint when you're working with your font and your color choices that you might be using to design your poster. You want to choose 2 or 3 different fonts and 2 or 3 different colors maximum. So that way it's not a terribly, so that way the fonts and the colors aren't completely distracting everybody from the message. Like in this poster. This poster has a lot going on. This poster almost has too much going on. This gradient background is a bit distracting. There are a lot of images at use here. There are a couple of different font types, lots of different colors for the font headings. It's almost a little bit distracting. Plus, the silly emojis. While I like the emojis, I think they're cute. I don't think they necessarily belong in a research poster. So if somebody were to see this poster at a poster session, they might be focusing more on the different colors, the different pictures, how overwhelming it might be. Like this is a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And they might not necessarily focus as much on the content. And additionally, in some places where there might not be a lot of contrast between the color and the background and the text, it might even be hard to read. So that's something to keep in mind as you're designing your poster. Make sure that you're exercising restraint and not going overboard with your poster. If I go back a couple of slides here, I actually have, this is the same poster, but with a little bit more restraint exercised with the colors. There's only 2 here, that blue and that purple. We've got a couple fewer images and then only 2 different fonts. And if I remember correctly, I think that this does have close to 800 words for the text. But this is a more restrained version of this example here. So keep that in mind. Try not to go too crazy with your content. One thing that you can do is if you do have a lot of text or a lot of other information to present, you can type that up as a paper if you haven't done so already, and then have that available for people. Either you can send them to a link to a Dropbox file, which has the content that you wanted to share that wouldn't fit on the poster, or send them to the ACM Digital Library to read your paper. And that's how you can get that additional information out without cramming it all into a poster. Next, I want to pay attention to the attention to detail section. This is what helps make a poster look polished and professional, paying attention to these little tiny details. And we're going to pay attention to detail in 3 areas: text, images, and layout. So the first section we're going to pay attention to is text. There's a couple of text details that you want to keep in mind as you're designing your poster, or even as you're thinking about how to design your poster. You want to, as I've mentioned, you want to stick to two different fonts for your poster. And my suggestions are, and then this is a suggestion that every poster designer that I've seen has made, is to stick with serif fonts for your body texts and sans serif for your headings. So serif fonts, as you can see in this image here, serifs have a little flag at the end of the stroke of each letter. And for large amounts of small body text, it's easier for our eyes to pick out the words. It's easier for our brains to process the text when it's in a serif font. However, with sans serif font, you can see that it doesn't have these flags on the end of each stroke. And when you have, when you're using sans serif font, if you're using a sans serif font, that's easier to see when it's larger. Additionally, using serif and sans serif like this, using serif for your body text and sans serif for your headings, also introduces some additional contrast to help them stand out. So this is also helping you use one of those page layout principles to help your poster look its best. Additionally, you want to make sure that you don't forget to spell check and proofread as you're putting together your poster. I'm not entirely sure if Illustrator, for example, so there's 3 programs that I typically have helped people use with creating research posters. And while I'm not sure about Illustrator, I'm pretty sure that PowerPoint, yes, I know, PowerPoint for research posters, we'll talk about that later. But for PowerPoint and for InDesign, you can do spell checking. In fact, we've got a spell check up here in InDesign, doing some spell checking right here. And so spell checking and proofreading your content is especially important because it helps make sure that you're not making any errors in your text, that you're not using a word that might sound the same but is spelled differently and not quite the right word for the situation. And just make sure that your poster is saying exactly what you wanted to say and it's looking its best. So that is one of the more important places to pay attention to text detail, making sure that you've spell checked and proofread. Now, if you've been working on your poster a lot and you're a little bit on poster overload, maybe you might want to check with a friend and have them do a proofread of your poster to make sure that everything is looking its best. I know that when I've been working on a publication for a while, my eyes start to just glaze over a little bit when I'm looking at the publication, whether it's a poster or a handout or anything that I've been working on for a while. And I know I'll miss things because I'm so deeply ingrained in this project. I've been working on it so much that things don't necessarily stand out to me if they're wrong at this point. So passing it along to a friend or a colleague who can take a look at your poster and make sure everything is spelled correctly, make sure you're using proper grammar, all that stuff, that can be helpful too. Now we're going to talk about paying attention to detail with images. Now, when we're working with images need to have a resolution of 150 dots per inch, so when we're talking about dots per inch, that indicates the dots of ink that are printed per linear inch of paper. And the more of those dots per inch, the better our images are going to look. So that resolution, that dots per inch refers to the resolution, and having a higher resolution means our images are going to look their best. So you want to make sure that they are at an absolute minimum of 150 dpi for the resolution in order to print properly. If you have something that has a lower resolution, for example, most images that you're going to find on the web have a resolution of 72 dpi, or 72 dots per inch. They're not going to print out quite as nicely especially on a large format printer. They're going to look pixelated or grainy. So one example I have here, this is an example of this is a low resolution version of an image that I worked with for one of the research posters I made recently. You can see it looks very pixelated, and if I were to print that out, that's not going to look very good. Now, if I made sure that it was a higher resolution image, it's going to come out looking crisp and clean. You can see that in the image that I've got up here on the right side. So that's something to pay attention to when you're collecting your images. Now, if you're scanning your images, or if you've created the images and you know that they're at a higher resolution, you should be good. But otherwise, you might want to double check your images and make sure that they are at a good printing resolution. And I've got a resource for you later on that'll help you with that when I talk about images briefly again. Now, last and certainly not least is making sure you pay attention to detail with alignment. Now, here's another version of that video gaming cats poster. It might look a little off, it looks a little sloppy, but it's not, when you're just looking at it like this, it's a little hard to tell, oh, is this intentional, or did they just put things together like this? It looks a little messy, things aren't neatly lined up. Now when I've got these lines here, you can see things are definitely not neatly aligned. When things are nice and neatly lined up, things look neater, things look cleaner. People don't necessarily notice good alignment, but they will notice bad alignment. So make sure you've got your page elements lined up neatly as best you can in your poster. And all of the page layout programs that I mentioned will have some way of turning on grids and then guides that will help you keep things aligned. So you don't have to draw lines in there or add things yourself. Your page layout program is definitely going to help you with that. Now, step 2 of the process, you're going to collect your text and your images. Now, I've talked a little bit about the text for your poster, and I'll go into a little bit more detail here. First off, you want to make sure that for your text, think of the text of your poster as an extended structured abstract. So for my research poster that I'm putting together for the paper that I wrote on creating training videos, the structure for my poster is going to roughly follow the structure of my paper, but I'm going to condense each section down to a smaller amount of words, because if people want to learn more about making training videos, I wrote a whole paper on that, and they can download that paper at their convenience, or they can pick my brain while we're there talking at the poster session. So again, it just boils down to not overwhelming the reader. So think of your text for your poster as an extended structured abstract. Now, as I've mentioned previously, if you're doing a poster for a communication award, you want to approach it a little bit differently, because you don't have text written up necessarily for your communication award winner. So one way to think of it is possibly introduce the product, talk about why you created it, what sort of need it's filling, and then how you made it. So going through the process of, what things did you try to, as you were creating this project, what were roadblocks that you encountered, things like that. And then how the people at your university received it. Did they like it? Did they think of it like, maybe there's other things you could add here? And then also another thing to add is possibly things you might do with this project in the future, things that you might do similarly with other topics in the future. So that's something to keep in mind if you're creating a poster for a communication award. For your images, again, make sure your image resolution is going to be high enough to print well. So 150 dpi or higher. And so for help with this, there is, actually, that's the same page here. On the Indiana University IT training website, we have a whole workshop dedicated to creating posters. And this piece is just dedicated entirely to gathering high quality images. And at the end of today's session, I'll share a link to this PowerPoint so you can actually download it and access the links, because there are a couple of other ones I want to share with everybody. But through here, it goes into detail about what resolution refers to, and then shows you an example of what something might look like if you print it out at a low resolution but have it nice and big. My kitty cat Steve looks a little blurry there thanks to it being a low resolution picture. And then we've got tips for finding large images that while it might have a low resolution, you can resize them in Photoshop and change the resolution to make sure that they are a higher resolution. We've got step-by-step instructions here to help with that process. And that is linked in the presentation. So that can be a big help, especially if you've got a lot of images that you know you want to use, but you're not sure of the resolution. Now, step 3 is where everything starts to come together. You know the page layout principles, you've got your text and images. Now you're ready to plan your layout. And the first step of this is literally sketching out a rough draft of your poster, whether it's maybe drawing it up in maybe Photoshop or Microsoft Paint, or getting out a whiteboard and sketching something out on a whiteboard. Or with me, I did it on old-fashioned paper with a pencil, or in the example on the left, with a smart pen that just pulled everything onto the computer. But these are sketches of actual posters that I either have worked on or am working on, like this Audition the Basics one. That, while it's not the final form of that poster, that's an idea that I had for one of my communication award winners this year. So sketching out the rough draft ahead of time gives you the opportunity to think about where things are going to land on the page without having to deal with the additional cognitive load of trying to work in a page layout program. So you can sketch things out, sketch out a couple of different ideas, get a rough idea of where you might want to put things on your paper, on your poster. And then once you found out, okay, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to go, then you've got a roadmap for putting together your poster in your page layout program. You've got an idea of where you're going, so you can just jump right in and start putting things on the page instead of trying to rearrange things and making sure things, fit together, or, Armand are a pair that has enough contrast, Calibri in Times New Roman, or Tahoma in Georgia, but these aren't necessarily like the only fonts you can use. Fire up your page layout program. Heck, even open up Word and just start typing in Word and try out some different font combinations to see how things look, to see how things work, and just see what works best for your poster, for the content that you're trying to present, for the information that you're trying to share. And while I didn't include it in this poster, in the presentation, one place that can be helpful for having, for doing things with color is colorlovers.com. If I type it in here, colorlovers.com, it's color spelled the British way. And Color Lovers has a large collection of just color palettes that you can work from, and apparently a lot of ads because I don't have an ad blocker on here. But if you go to the palettes section, they have a million different color palettes that you can just browse through, take a look at, and gain inspiration for your poster. Some of them might work better together than others, but you can find all sorts of different color combinations to work with. So I will actually, though, put this in the chat for everybody. There, colorlovers.com. Oh, no, that was not. I'm not sure that it sent it to everybody, but worst comes to worst, I can add that before I share the PowerPoint.
It only went to organizers and panelists.
Oh,
so
I will add that very quickly.
Yeah, I can. I think I sent it to everyone. There you go.
Oh, that's good. Awesome. Wonderful. But yeah, so that's one place you can start to get some color inspiration if you're not sure where to get started when putting together colors for your poster. I use Color Lovers a lot when I'm thinking, okay, I have an idea for how I want to lay things out, but I'm not sure what colors I want to use. Another thing you can do, though, if you're working with a color scheme, one thing you can do, or you want to work with a specific color scheme, but you're not sure where to start, Some page layout programs will allow you to like for example, InDesign gives you the option to pull a color from a photo and it'll create a color scheme based on the colors in that photo, which can be really helpful. So that's another option for choosing colors for your poster. And I've got some additional design tips that will help you out when putting together your poster as you're putting together your layout. First off is to avoid using images or gradients for the background of your poster. So having images or gradients for the background can make it hard to read, can make it a little distracting. And also, while gradients look really cool, they don't always print very well. Sometimes they can print with a little bit of banding where it'll look like instead of the smooth, beautiful gradient between 2 colors or 3 colors, there'll be some stripes in there. They're subtle, but you can see them if you're looking at it. So when you're putting together your poster, make sure that you're not using things that are going to make it hard to read or distract people from reading your text. If you want to use a color for the background of your poster, that's great. Just make sure that there's also enough contrast to read the text over that color. So don't go with a dark colored background and then black text. That's not going to be a great reading experience. Additionally, you want to make sure that any charts or graphs that you include have a title and then are also properly labeled. So that way it helps your readers make sense of why they're included and what data they're showing. That way they can relate it to the text that is in the poster. Oh yeah, this chart goes along with this information. And so in Excel, for example, if you've got charts you're putting together in Excel, you can easily add a heading and axes labels to help make things make a little bit more sense. You also want to keep in mind that as you're putting together your poster, the colors on your screen are going to look a little different when they're printed. It's just a fact of life. Our computer screens can't precisely reproduce the colors that we would come out when printed. Some monitors can get really close, but it's always going to look a little bit different. Now, if there's a huge difference, like colors are much darker than you expected, maybe that might be a problem with the printer. I have had that happen before when printing out posters, but keep in mind they may look a little bit different. And so don't be surprised, don't be startled, don't panic. It'll be okay. And you will also want to make sure that your poster can be read from a distance because people aren't always going to be able to make it right up to your poster. You might be discussing something with a couple of people right up close to your poster, and there might be somebody else who's interested in it, but they can't get up close right away. So if you make sure that your text can be read from a distance, it's really going to help other people, everybody who's interested in reading your poster. Now, one way to check and make sure that your poster can be read from a distance is to take your poster that you've designed once it's ready, print it out, but scale it down to a size that'll fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. If you can still read your poster text on that 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, then you're in good shape. It's a good size, and then people should be able to read it from a distance. If it's hard to read, or if there's too much going on and it makes it a little bit, if things look crowded on that sheet of paper, you might want to do a little tweaking with your layout. So those are things to keep in mind as you're putting together your layout. And speaking of layout, I've got a couple of different posters that you might want to use for some inspiration as you're putting together your posters. And some of these even have templates that you can use to use as a starting point for building your poster. So one of my favorite research poster experts is Colin Purrington. He has helped me out a lot. Well, his content, I've only ever interacted with him in one Twitter tweet, but his content has helped me out a lot when making research posters. And so here's an example of a basic research poster that also gives you hints about what to include in your research poster so you're not overwhelming people. So this is a pretty simple layout with just content and some text boxes and just laid out in a 3-column format. And he even says places to not put logos. You want your title to stand out and be on its own and grab people's attention. So if you have logos, as he says, put them on your business card, not on your poster. I understand some universities encourage you to put their logo on your poster somewhere. You might find a better spot to put it than up here. Maybe include it maybe along with further information or some other place that might work out well. But you can get to his site through the link that's down here, cullenpurrington.com/tips/poster design. He has lots and lots of valuable information, not only on how to construct research posters, but also on how to avoid making a bad research poster. He's got some examples of some doozies out there that people have put together, or that he's put together on purpose, that will help you learn what not to do when making a research poster. This example is a newer one that a colleague sent to me, because she knows that I do a lot of work with research posters. She knows that I put together a course on research posters, and she saw a video about this new style of research poster recently, and I find it really interesting. The way that that Mike Morrison was putting this together, the way he wanted to, the goal he was aiming at with this style of poster is to get the main point across in such a way that anybody can see it as they're walking by, even from across the room, and have that main point stated in language that anybody can read, and emphasizing the most important parts of your content. And then including just the basic information off to the sides here, just an introduction to your research, maybe methods or other information about your project, your research, the information you're trying to share. And while this one is more specifically aimed towards a scientific research poster, you could easily repurpose this into a poster for our presentation session here. I think there's a lot of different ways you could go with this. You don't necessarily have to include the same content here, but you can use this layout, especially if you've got something you're really excited about, something really big and important. You can put that big, important thing right up front as the main thing on your poster. Now, if you're like me and you're a little artsy and creative and want to try something different, want to try doing something fun, well, don't be afraid to have fun with your research posters. This was one of the first ones that I put together, and while I am 100% sure it has far too much text on it, the things I learned as I create posters, the layout itself is pretty interesting. It's a little bit different, a little bit outside of the norm, but it's attention-getting. I decided for this poster I wanted to go with a theme like, this is somebody's desk, and these are some papers that somebody has on their desk that are referring to, page layout stuff. And so that's what I went with. That's the theme I went with this. And so don't be afraid to be creative. Don't be afraid to think outside the poster box when you're putting together some research posters. And as you can see here, if I go scrolling all the way back here, I sketched it out. I scrolled too far here. I sketched it out right here in just a rough draft. And this isn't even quite the same poster that I ended up with. You can see it looks a little bit different. Things are arranged slightly differently. There's not this big empty spot here, that's for sure. But at least that helped me, get into a point where I could lay things out on my page and come out with this. So don't be afraid to be unique with your poster layout. But now that you've gotten all this information, now that you know, okay, I've got some page layout principles, I've got some ideas for designing, I've got my text and my images. Now you're actually going to open up your page layout program and actually build your poster. So there are three main programs that I teach about when putting together a research poster. The first one is PowerPoint. Now, PowerPoint is very much not meant for poster creation, but it's a very easy program to use when creating a research poster. If you're not much of a designer, if you've never opened a page layout program before, if you're intimidated by all of the buttons that Adobe programs have, and there are plenty of them, maybe PowerPoint might be a good place to start for you. And that's totally okay. I've seen some great posters that were made in PowerPoint. I've made some great posters in PowerPoint. But that might be one place you might want to start for creating a poster. The next one is Illustrator. Illustrator is made for printing, made for making print graphics. It's a little bit more complex than working with PowerPoint, But if you've got some experience in Adobe programs, like you've used Photoshop or Illustrator before and you might be a little bit more familiar with Adobe interfaces, Illustrator might be a good place to start for you. Now, if you've done a lot of designing before and are very familiar with Adobe programs, my recommendation is InDesign. InDesign offers just about everything you'll need to make posters. It's going to be very complex if you've never made a poster before. But if you've got some familiarity with Adobe, I recommend jumping into InDesign, getting familiar with it if you're not already, and using that because it's made for making posters as well as books and brochures and all sorts of print documents or documents that have print and images and text on them. But on that, creating research posters on our website here, if I come back here, I will bring that link up later actually. Getting distracted. But there is a link that'll take you to later on in here that will show you the entire Creating Research Posters course that gives you step-by-step instructions on how to build a poster in PowerPoint, on how to build a poster in Illustrator, and how to build a poster in InDesign. And I'll show you those in a little bit here. So when you're building your poster, no matter what program you choose, you want to make sure that your page is set to the correct size before you start putting anything on your page. So if you start designing your poster and you've got it at 8.5 by 11 and then realize later, oh, I've got to blow this up. I'll just tell it to print at 30 by 40. It's going to look really, really rough. It's going to be pixelated. It's going to be splotchy. Or if you try to scale it up later, things might not be aligned quite as neatly as they were when you had it small. So make sure that your page is set to the correct size ahead of time before you start putting anything on your page. And there are 2 different poster sizes for this year's conference. We're going to be working with 20 by 30 inch poster boards and 30 by 40 inch poster boards. Also, once you've got your page set up, then you can add your images and text. And then when you're finished with everything, once you've got everything laid out, your images in there, your text in there, everything is styled the way you want it, then you're going to save your poster as a PDF for printing. So you want to make sure you save your file as a PDF because first off, it makes sure your poster looks exactly the way you want it. Things like, for example, if you're missing fonts, for example, if you bring it to another computer to print and they don't have the fonts you've used, having it as a PDF ensures that it's going to keep those fonts. It also ensures that you're not missing any files like images or special fonts or other things that you might have incorporated when you're sending it off to print. One of the things that happens in InDesign, for example, is if you don't keep all of your images together in the same folder as your publication, or you just move your publication without the images are going to show up at very low quality and they're not going to print well. So having everything saved as a PDF is going to make your life easier and make your poster print beautifully. Now, when printing your poster, there are a couple of different things you can do, different places you could check out to go print posters. First off, if your campus has a plotter or a large format printer, you might want to go there first for poster printing. I know that Indiana University down here in Bloomington has a poster printer at our library, and they have pretty reasonable prices. I think it costs maybe $16 to print a 36 by 48 inch poster, which is pretty reasonable. So at your university, they might not even charge you, or if they do charge, it's going to be pretty reasonable compared to, say, getting it professionally printed. Now, there are times where you might have to get it professionally printed if you're in a rush, or if you're printing it on a day when the printers on campus are not accessible, things like that. So you can go to Staples or FedEx, Kinko's, or a local print shop to get your poster printed. This can get a little expensive though, so keep that in mind. And last, but certainly not least, I am all about doing things differently. And one of the things that I discovered before last year's conference was fabric posters. Fabric posters are the best thing ever. You can have your research poster printed by spoonflower.com. I will actually show you their website. They have a blog post that is dedicated to putting together research posters or just any kind of poster and having that ready for you to take to a conference. So it gives you suggestions for sizes, gives you shipping deadlines and how much it's going to cost. And when I have ordered posters through Spoonflower before, the ones that I've presented at last year's conference, it cost me, I want to say $21, including shipping, for getting that one poster printed, which is really reasonable. And then afterwards, you've got something cool to share as, you know, as a nice conference souvenir. You've got your whole poster as fabric. You could do all sorts of things with it afterwards if you want to. Turn it into a blanket, make a shirt out of it, wear it as a cape. You can do it, but I highly recommend a fabric poster because it's easy to travel with. You can bunch it up in your carry-on and then take it out when you get to the hotel, iron it a little bit if you need to. And it's just, it's one less thing to worry about leaving behind in airport security.
Beth, I'm going to interrupt you. I have on my to-do list this week, my daughter's a senior and she's a swimmer, and we usually order vinyl posters, and they are terrible to try to hang up places. So I'm going to order a fabric poster. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, with fabric posters, you can hang them up with tape. You can use thumbtacks. Last year at the conference, I just wrapped it around a display board and taped it to the back. So they're pretty versatile. It's really awesome. Now I've got a little bit more additional information just about the posters at the conference. First off, poster boards are going to be provided at the conference. And our poster session chair, Eric, who is here today, or at least he was this earlier. I do not see the attendee list at the moment, but Eric's going to share some more information about shipping and traveling with posters a little closer to the conference, and he can answer questions that you have about poster logistics. So if you have any questions, you can always ask Eric, and he will help you out. Now, if you've watched today's presentation and you're ready to create your poster and you want some more in-depth assistance than what I was able to do today, there is so much information about creating research posters that I could fill an entire 2 to 3 hour workshop with it. But we only had an hour today. So instead, I'm going to direct everybody to IT Training's Creating Research Posters course. If I click on this link here, it will show you the wonderful course, and it gives you in-depth instructions on how it gives you the design principles, gives you guidelines for writing the poster text. There's that gathering high quality images article I showed you earlier, and then the step-by-step instructions for creating your research poster in PowerPoint, Illustrator, and InDesign. So if I come through here, it gives you precise instructions for setting up the slide size, so it's the right size for your poster. I've got a video walking you through adding text to a poster in PowerPoint, and then also the step-by-step instructions. And same thing with images. So if you're like, okay, I know I want to build a poster in this program, you can find that information here, and then also some additional resources for creating research posters. So that link is in the slideshow. I'll share the slideshow with you momentarily. So at this point, does anybody have any questions? I'm more than happy to answer any questions we have. We've got 7 minutes left, so. And if nobody has any questions right now, but you come up with questions later, you can always email me. You can always find me on the SIGUCCS Slack. I think if Lori wants to, you can put my email address in the chat.
Okay.
So you can send things to everybody. I do not mind helping people out with research posters. It's one of the things I really enjoy doing. So feel free to email me later on if you've got any questions.
I also put Eric's email in the chat. And here is Beth's.
So I'm happy to give any design help. So if you're designing and you want a little bit of feedback, I did it last year for some people who were putting together posters. And I'm more than happy to provide some design feedback for you guys as well. So if you come up with questions or need some feedback later on, there's my email. Feel free to send me an email. And now, the copy of today's presentation. This is a short URL that will, once you click on it, load it in your browser, it will immediately download this PowerPoint presentation. So it is go.iu.edu/2btj. It keeps it nice and short. And that'll give you the exact copy of what I put together today with all of the links to all of the resources that can help you build a research poster, whether it's templates from those 2 designers that I shared or links to the Creating Research Posters course. So that's go.iu.edu/2btj.
Well, thank you so much, Beth, and thank you everyone for attending. The recording will be available early next week on our YouTube channel. So I hope everyone has a good evening, and we'll see you soon.